This is Africa, endowed with vast natural resources. This is Africa, home to the world's fastest growing population. This is Africa, a potential green energy force to be reckoned with, from Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, capable of powering the entire East Africa. West Africa's gas reserves, capable of powering vast regions, to the Democratic Republic of Congo's Grand Inga Dam project, capable of powering the entire continent. This is Africa, where the discovery of large oil and gas deposits are still being made. But this is also Africa, where we export significant crude oil and import even more significant petroleum products. This is Africa, where one of the largest well-managed airlines in the world continues its growth trajectory unhindered. But this is also Africa, where a business person from Algeria has to connect outside the continent to travel to Zimbabwe. According to the World Bank, the sub-Saharan African region needs to invest a staggering 7.1% of its GDP annually in infrastructure to meet its sustainable development goals. The African Development Bank estimates that closing the continent's infrastructure gap will require a minimum of $130 billion per year, leaving a shortfall of around $100 billion. While bridging this financing chasm presents a Herculean task, change is already simmering beneath the surface as several initiatives gain ground. Because this is Africa, where infrastructure investments in transport and logistics, industry, science and technology present an immense potential for both private and institutional investors. Africa's path to prosperity rests on two pillars: substantial investments in transportation infrastructure and the ratification of ambitious trade agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. This is Africa, where our shared prosperity lies in integration. Africa faces significant trade hurdles as barriers, tariffs, and restrictions on the movement of people and goods continue to slow policy efforts made by the African Union and regional economic communities to forge a unified continent capable of thriving in the global marketplace. The AfCFTA, with its potential to create the world's largest single market of over 1.4 billion people and a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, is a game changer, complementing trade integration by reducing transportation time on roads, ports, and border posts, promises to boost exports by 11.5% and GDP by 2%. To fully harness these benefits, Africa must develop an integrated continent-wide infrastructure network. This will require increasing annual infrastructure investments from 3.5% to 4.5% of GDP, or an additional $40 billion a year. Public-private partnerships and the mobilization of domestic resources and local capital markets are pivotal for the continent's development. And because this is Africa, connectivity matters, with the continent's digital economy undergoing a seismic shift. Projections by the African Development Bank show that the digital sector will surge from $115 billion in 2023 to $712 billion by 2050. Africa's rapid adoption of mobile financial services is fueling financial inclusion and growth, highlighting the transformative potential of digital infrastructure. Africa's astounding leapfrog in mobile telephony and, now, mobile financial services is evidence of the continent's endless opportunities for investments that connect us. This is Africa, where challenges present immense opportunities. By investing strategically, integrating effectively, and prioritizing connectivity, Africa can unlock a new era of shared prosperity for its burgeoning population. The Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025 provide a roadmap for this transformation, a call to action for governments, the private sector, and international partners to unite behind a common vision. We welcome you to the next Africa Prosperity Dialogues, which takes place in Accra from the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025. Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025, delivering Africa's prosperity through infrastructure. Invest, integrate, connect.
Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you all to the launch of the 2025 edition of the Africa Prosperity Dialogues. Your presence here underscores your commitment to our shared vision for a united and prosperous Africa for all Africans. On 1st January 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Area was born. It was arguably the single monumental practical policy step towards integration by Africa's political leaders since the formation of the OAU in May 1963. Our political leaders have readily embraced the AFCFTA because they envision it as a necessary instrument for achieving shared and sustainable prosperity. Its objective is simple, but at the same time, not that simple. The task is that we build right here in Africa the world's largest single market of 55 nations, but to do so requires a collectively sincere, we put our money where our mouths are, kind of sustained commitment from all sides. And by this we mean principally the political leaders of Africa, the institutions of state, the continent's institutional and development partners, and champions of business, including SMEs, non-Africans doing business in Africa, and global Africans. For us here at the Africa Prosperity Network, the most critical drivers of Africa's economic integration are the continent's private sector operators. APN was thus set up to deliberately and proactively help mobilize, aggregate, and engage Africa's business decision makers in the whole process of creating, with utmost urgency, a vibrant economic ecosystem that enables the free and productive movement of people, goods, and services across member states. It is for this that we created the annual Africa Prosperity Dialogues in 2022. A unique, dedicated platform where we bring political, business, and thought leaders to understand each other's responsibilities and interests, for them to think together, plan together, and work together on the things that need priority attention for deepening intra-Africa trade and investment. Last January's APD focused on the issue of adding value to Africa's productivity. The Pediatric Compact, which came out of APD 2024, was formally tabled at the AU's Heads of State Summit in Addis Ababa last February. One key compact item is the need for a continent-wide interoperability system. There's no debate that achieving interoperability across payment systems in Africa will make the single market concept meaningful to tens of millions of ordinary traders in Africa, majority of whom are women. We are therefore pleased to announce that APN, with the support of our strategic partners, including the Government of the Republic of Ghana, the host nation of AFCFTA, the Bank of Ghana, MTN, Telecel, GSMA, AFDB, Afrexim Bank, and Smart Africa are committed to the campaign to make it possible for Africans to buy and sell across Africa, and to do so anywhere in Africa, including everywhere they don't go, by merely using their mobile money wallet. We have outlined a series of programs to help us achieve this. Africa is brimming with potential. It has the world's fastest growing population, projected to almost double to 2.5 billion people in the next 25 years. It has the world's youngest population, with 70% of sub-Saharan Africa under the age of 30. It has the world's largest free trade area. Africa boasts of an enviable wealth of natural resources. Imagine what Africa will be like in 20 years' time if we choose to get it right in this, our time. Despite the continent's potential, its infrastructure gap serves as a more potent blockade. The success of AFCFTA hinges on key enablers such as energy, water, R&D, i.e. research and development, ICT, transport and logistics, and the digital economy. This calls for substantial investments in infrastructure that will yield even greater rewards, enabling IFOS to create a larger pool of good jobs with good pay to happen. We stand at a critical juncture in history where unlocking prosperity now more than ever depends on prioritizing investment in infrastructure, connecting our people through infrastructure, and integrating our economies to create and spread opportunities and prosperity for every community in Africa. This is where we must now direct our collaborative efforts if we are serious about allowing Africans to do business across Africa, and for our young people who will build Africa to see their future in Africa. At APN, we envision an Africa where every bridge built serves as a flyover to opportunity, and every road paved leads to prosperity. Our intention is to use the next APDs to show what is being done, what has to be done, and what we must commit to having done in the areas of infrastructure to facilitate the free movement of people, goods, and services. Our future as a people rests heavily on our ability to reimagine how to fund and link infrastructural developments and our boldness to get to work on them. We are here this morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to unveil the theme, dates, and venues for both the Africa Prosperity Dialogues in 2025 and the 2025 Africa Prosperity Champions Awards and Presidential Gala Dinner. I thank you for your participation and your attention. Thanks.
We will now share with you the video we have been waiting for. Thank you very much.
Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their land.
Well then, a big fraud is the system. We are tired of being the victims of their faraway wars. Tear down the Berlin walls. Because don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south.
A child is nothing, it is only the glory of his forebears that the world.
From Accra to Kingston, 5G internet, no matter where me dey. I believe in Africa.
One day, the African continent must be a single market, must trade using local currency, must have a single currency, and we have taken concrete steps towards that particular vision.
We want Africa to be really rich, and that its richness is profiting everybody without leaving anyone behind.
Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that Africa is blessed. Africa is not a poor continent. In fact, she's too rich to be poor. Our continent has every natural resource imaginable: oil, gas, minerals, and an abundance of sunlight. We have some 65% of all arable land available to feed 9 billion people globally by 2030.
Let's come together and grab our share. Join the fast track to prosperity. We want food and energy security.
If we can start to process and add value to these raw materials that are currently being exported to the West, we're looking at $500 billion worth of goods, retail value, that could be sold in and amongst ourselves. Imagine what that would look like for the continent.
So, Blood Ghana, as far back as 2011, was the first in the food processing sector to attain the highest certification at that time, ISO 22000.
This is Africa. Africa's time.
Part of the problem has really been Africa's own story in terms of how the order of things were pre-colonial times and during colonization as well, and how economic factors were arranged for the African people.
Côte d'Ivoire, loqué, Angola, loqué, Rwanda, loqué, Morocco, loqué, Barbados, loqué, Zimbabwe, loqué. This is Africa's time, Mama Africa. Let every clock chime. It's not about you, in spite of you. Africa will unite. Let this word sink in your head. Divide and rule is there. All Africa, look, Ethiopia, look, Mali, look, Cameroon, look, Kenya, look, Tunisia, look, Haiti, look, Namibia now.
Tonight, at this prestigious gala dinner, we celebrate the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards. It is a celebration of Africa's growth and unity and represents a critical shift from poverty alleviation to prosperity enhancement in Africa.
Nigeria, Congo, Tanzania, Egypt, Guyana, South Africa. No dollarization, true unification. We are the biggest single market. Say no more to the colonial racket.
My father, who was born in 1912, dreamt of an Africa which was united. He talked about the day when an African continental free trade area would be a reality. And we're now here.
They don't care, they never will be fair. Let's come together and grab our share. Join the fast track to prosperity. We want food and energy security till eternity. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa, yes, I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa, yeah. All Africa, look it's in it.
Where we are today is called the Peduasi Lodge. It was, over 60 years ago, the official retreat of Ghana's first president, Kwame Nkrumah. So being here today is a continuation of the dream of those men and women who fought for Africa's independence from colonialization and who believed that the best route for Africa was to unite.
Je voudrais signaler en premier lieu l'importance cruciale des investissements dans les infrastructures qui sont la pierre angulaire de la compétitivité et de l'industrialisation de l'Afrique.
challenges we have faced in recent years, from COVID-19, conflicts, climate change, to the impact of crises around the world, has made it abundantly clear that what Africa needs is a sustainable but also resilient economy.
But I think on occasions like these, we give ourselves an excellent opportunity to showcase the difference we can make, to showcase the opportunities we bring, and to showcase the ideas we can contribute to solving global problems and global issues.
We believe that to promote and strengthen economic and commercial relations, we must ensure an increasingly vibrant involvement of business sector and financial institutions at the national, regional, and international level.
And now may the Africa trade torch be duly handed over, starting with His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, a moment in our history. The Africa trade torch is being shown to the world.
It's not about you, in spite of you. Africa will unite. Let this word sink in your head. Divide and rule is there. All Africa, look at Ethiopia.
So, I Believe in Africa was the theme song you heard. It was written by Gabi Ochiridako and performed by Stoneboy. Le thème de la chanson que vous venez d'entendre a été écrit par Gabi Ochiridako et interprété par Stoneboy, le musicien. Alors, our highly coveted awards, the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards, go beyond the ordinary. They don't only recognize successes clocked by individuals, organizations, and nations in the achievement of strategic, prosperity-oriented milestones. They encourage the enablers of prosperity to do more. Nos awards convoités, le Africa Prosperity Champions Awards, vont au-delà de l'ordinaire. Ils ne reconnaissent pas seulement les succès réalisés par des individus, des organisations ou des nations dans la réalisation de jalons stratégiques orientés vers la prospérité. Ils encouragent les facilitateurs de la prospérité à en faire davantage. Today, you will hear from some of our partners, including His Excellency, Mr. Charles Abani, who has been closely involved in our deliberations. Thank you very much. And Honorable Ursula Owusu-Ekufo, whose wise counsel on advocacy in the area of interoperability has been an immense help to us. Aujourd'hui, vous entendrez certains de nos partenaires, notamment Son Excellence Charles Abani, qui a été étroitement impliqué dans nos délibérations, ainsi que Son Excellence Ursula Owusu-Ekufo, dont les conseils avisés sur les plaidoyers dans les domaines de l'interopérabilité m'ont été très utiles. Nous allons à présent recevoir des déclarations par nos partenaires clés. We are now going to hear statements from our key partners. Shall we welcome, with a round of applause, Her Excellency Rosemary Mbabazi, High Commissioner of the Republic of Rwanda to Ghana.
Good morning. I want to hear the energy in the house. Good morning. Great, thank you. Honorable ministers present, the UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Charles Abani, and the members of the UN family present here, Mr. Gabi Asale Ochiridako, Executive Chairman of Africa Prosperity Network, Excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed partners, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I am delighted to join you today at this launch of the 3rd edition of the Africa Prosperity Dialogue APD 25. I extend my heartfelt congratulations to His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo for his unwavering commitment to fostering prosperity and for hosting this gathering in Ghana. The Africa Prosperity Dialogue continues to emerge as a meeting point of brightest minds from both the private and public sector to chart a course towards sustainable development and economic prosperity for Africa. It is through forums such as the APD that we harness the collective wisdom and innovative spirit needed to overcome the challenges facing our continent. Rwanda proudly reaffirms its steadfast commitment to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the agreement whose historic signature took place in Kigali in 2018. CFTA represents a transformative milestone in Africa's journey towards economic integration and prosperity. By facilitating intra-Africa trade, CFTA holds the promise of unlocking the vast potential of our continent, creating jobs, fostering innovation, and driving inclusive growth for all African nations. The CFTA promises to spur industrialization, attract investment, and enhance competitiveness of at the global stage. It will empower African businesses to tap into new markets, catalyzing economic diversification and reducing reliance on external aid. To fully leverage the potential of digital trade under the CFTA and stimulate economic growth across the continent, African countries must prioritize the development of robust digital infrastructure. And I know the chairman has already spoken about many enablers, including transport, logistics, infrastructure. I just want to focus more on the digital trade. The infrastructure should encompass several key elements that I want to highlight briefly. One is the regulatory environment, establishing conducive regulations, including those related to broadband infrastructure network, cybersecurity, data protection, and cross-border data flows is essential to minimizing barriers and fostering trust in digital transactions. The second one is connectivity. Ensuring widespread access to high-speed internet, particularly in rural areas, and improving mobile network coverage are crucial for enabling seamless connectivity and facilitating digital trade. The number 3 is digital ID infrastructure, which is implementing secure digital identification systems that are interoperable. Like he rightly said, across borders is vital for authenticating individuals and businesses, thus enabling cross-border transaction. The 4th is digital payments. Developing efficient and secure payment gateways that support various methods, such as mobile money and digital wallets, is necessary to facilitate digital payments and ensuring financial stability. The e-commerce platforms are so very key. Tailoring the e-commerce platforms to suit the needs of African businesses, including multilingual and multi-currency support, is essential for expanding their reach and enabling efficient delivery of goods. The digital skills, of course, are very important. Providing training programs and technical education in digital technology is very crucial for equipping entrepreneurs, businesses, and customers with the necessary skills to engage in digital trade effectively. Cybersecurity. Establishing robust cybersecurity infrastructure and providing capacity building initiatives are imperative for protecting businesses and customers against cyber threats and ensuring the integrity of digital transactions. In Rwanda, we have built 24/7 cybersecurity threat response team and also established an institution which is National Cybersecurity Authority and a resourceful authentication team that provides platform for digital signature. And also, Mr. Gabi also talked about this partnership with Smart Africa Secretariat, which is hosted in Kigali. I think also embracing the Continental One Africa Network as African countries that are members of the Smart Africa Secretariat and Alliance have already established One Africa Network, which enables international calls to be affordable for voice and data, especially roaming rates, and keeping African traffic in Africa, and also building cross-border connectivity and building the clearing houses in Africa. The countries in East Africa, majorly among the 14 countries, have already removed barriers to roaming telecommunication services, and these charges have been reduced on voice and data by 70%. And this is already increasing traffic in the region, and the estimate is about 800% increase in the traffic in the region. This yields more revenues for the private sector, makes it easier for the people to communicate, and makes this dream become a reality. APD 25 will further deliberate on the implementation of the One Africa Market concept that comes at a good time, 5 years since the CFTA Secretariat was officially launched in 2020 under the leadership of His Excellency President Nana Addo. I commend the Africa Prosperity Network for its efforts in advancing the agenda of prosperity for Africa. Let us all use this platform to forge partnership, exchange ideas, and catalyze actions towards our shared vision of prosperous and integrated Africa. Together, we can build a continent where opportunity knows no boundaries and prosperity is within the reach of all of us. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency Rosemary Mbabazi, High Commissioner of Rwanda to Ghana. We will now go to His Excellency Charles Abani, United Nations Resident Coordinator for Ghana. A round of applause.
Good morning, all. I've just been advised that we're running late, so I'll be quick. Gabi Ochiridako, the visionary behind this big initiative, honorable ministers from different ministries here, excellencies from the diplomatic community, stalwarts from the private sector who are the key to this whole process, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, UN colleagues, all protocols observed. I'm deeply honored this morning to be able to address you on the launch of the third Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025, and I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Africa Prosperity Network, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, the Office of the President of the Republic of Ghana for spearheading this vital initiative, and to see APN making progress on actions agreed in the yearly dialogues. And I appreciate too my colleagues across the UN for their support to this important initiative. We gather today to discuss the critical component for our continent's future infrastructure, the lifeblood of our economies, enabling trade, facilitating transportation, and enhancing connectivity. Without it, our vision for a prosperous and resilient Africa remains just that, a vision. But with a collective action and strategic partnership, we can turn this vision into a reality. There's an estimated $170 billion gap a year for us to achieve this, with less than 40% of Africans having electricity, and still half of Africa without basic sanitation. We all know this stark reality. 600 million people live without grids, and our rail and road density lags behind other regions. Inadequate transport hampers economic activity, efficiency, and competitiveness. And we also know that infrastructure coverage can account for up to 30% of GDP growth in many African countries. The challenge is clear. We must find the finance to bridge the infrastructure gap, and we must put the partnerships on the table, particularly with the private sector, to enable this happen. There are a number of things that we must do. Investment will be key. We require significant funding to upgrade our infrastructure, and the global partners can provide the necessary capital to enable us to achieve this. But investment isn't just about money. It's also about expertise, technology, and knowledge sharing. By partnering with global leaders on infrastructure, we can tap into their experience, their know-how, ensuring that our projects are designed and implemented with the latest innovations and best practices. Integration is critical. Our infrastructure must be designed to facilitate the free flow of goods, services, and people across borders. This requires coordination and collaboration among African nations, as well as with our global partners. By integrating our infrastructure, we will create the seamless and efficient network that promotes trade, commerce, and economic growth. These are at the heart of what the APN is trying to achieve. As the two previous speakers have spoken about, connectivity is vital. Just yesterday, as if in a follow-on to what happened on the West Coast, East Africa is facing challenges around connectivity. So while we do have internet, we remain fragile in this space. Connectivity is no longer a luxury, it's an absolute necessity. Our infrastructure must be designed to support the growth of digital technologies, ensuring that all Africans have access to high-speed internet, mobile networks, and other digital platforms. We're just at the beginning. This will enable our innovators, entrepreneurs, and our teeming youth and citizens to participate fully in the global economy. So what must we do to enable this trade to happen? We must create an enabling environment that attracts investment and encourages collaboration. We must prioritize projects that have high impact on economic growth, job creation, and poverty reduction. We must leverage technology and innovation to drive efficiency, sustainability, and importantly, inclusivity in our infrastructure development. And lastly, we must bring everybody along. If you want to go fast, they say, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This proverb, often quoted, summarizes the essence of what we need to do in terms of partnerships. We cannot have a meaningful impact if we do not pool together our resources, our expertise, and our innovation. So I urge you to use this opportunity to commit to taking action. Let us work together to unlock the full potential of our continent, create new opportunities for growth and development, and ensure Africa takes its rightful place as a major player in the global economy. The UN stands fully behind this, and indeed, once I became aware of this visionary view, it was a no-brainer, really, that the UN must be part of this and play its supporting and facilitating role in this regard. We know that sustainable finance is at the core of the investments that are required, and so we must work through global governance systems to ensure that this happens, and then work on those specific catalyzing points exemplified in the 2024 topic around production, value addition, and trade. And building on that this time, I think the visionary idea of infrastructure as the base that connects us all. Let us work together to build the Africa we want, an Africa that is connected, integrated, and prosperous for all. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Charles Abani, UN Resident Coordinator. We are now going to move to another very important person. But before we do so, we're going to have a QR code of the program on the screen. So if you do not have the program, please use your phone to scan the QR code for it. We will now call on the stage His Honorable Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, Minister for Finance of the Republic of Ghana, for his address.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers of State, members of the diplomatic community, senior officials of the African Union Commission and the United Nations, Chairman of APN, esteemed delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged and honored to be part of the launch of the next Africa Prosperity Dialogues in 2025, aiming to spotlight the critical issues facing our continent and to explore innovative solutions to propel Africa towards sustainable prosperity. Over the past few years, the Africa Prosperity Dialogues have provided a platform for fostering dialogue and collaboration and finding innovative solutions to address our beloved continent's socio-economic challenges. As we gather today, we must reaffirm our commitment to driving sustainable development and prosperity across Africa. However, as a continent, we must recognize that we cannot achieve sustainable prosperity in isolation. An estimated 546 million of our people are now living in poverty, and 149 million non-poor Africans are at the risk of falling into it. Furthermore, UNICA estimates the annual Sustainable Development Goal financing gap for developing countries has increased by 1.7 trillion US dollars. Therefore, we have our work cut out for us. The challenges we face, from infrastructure deficits to economic disparities, require collective action and partnership on a continental scale. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of next year's prosperity dialogues, delivering Africa's prosperity through infrastructure, invest, integrate, connect, resonates deeply with Ghana's vision for a more interconnected and prosperous Africa and AU Agenda 2063. As we embark on this journey together, I would like to highlight a few key areas where our collective efforts can make a significant impact. Africa's infrastructure deficit impedes economic growth and development. Inadequate networks of roads, rail, air, and waterways make transport costs in Africa among the highest in the world. The African Development Bank estimates that closing the continent's infrastructure gap will require a minimum of $130 billion annually. Moreover, deficient infrastructure in today's Africa has been found to sap growth by as much as 2% a year. Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, we have a continental problem that requires a continental solution. As such, we must redouble our efforts to invest in critical infrastructure projects, including transportation, energy, and digital connectivity, to unlock Africa's full potential for trade and investment. Another notable concern is the escalating debt to GDP ratio across the continent, estimated by UNICA at 66% in 2023. In fact, more than half of African countries are debt distressed. Recent figures also indicate that African governments face $89 billion in external debt servicing this year alone, 2024, posing significant risk to fiscal sustainability and economic stability. This underscores the urgent need for concerted efforts to address debt sustainability and fiscal discipline. I wish to emphasize the importance of supporting Africa's financial and development finance institutions in playing a more active role in financing development initiatives across our continent. Strengthening the capacity and resources of our DFIs will enable them to mobilize capital more effectively and to channel investment towards priority sectors, including energy sector, transportation, and telecommunications. Ladies and gentlemen, a key feature of Africa's trade, which has had some adverse implications for its impact on economic growth and development, is its high external orientation and relatively low level of intra-regional trade. Intra-African trade stands at around 13%, compared to approximately 60%, 40%, and 30% of intra-regional trade that has been achieved by Europe, North America, and Asia, respectively. Even if allowance is made for Africa's unrecorded informal cross-border trade, the total level of intra-African trade is not likely to be more than 20%, which is still lower than that of other major regions of the world. Strengthening regional integration mechanisms through the African Continental Free Trade Area is therefore essential for fostering and promoting intra-African trade, enhancing economic resilience, and thereby creating inclusive growth. Ghana remains committed to supporting regional integration efforts and creating an enabling environment for cross-border trade and investment. Ladies and gentlemen, in truth, when we as Africans work together with a shared vision, we can overcome the challenges we are faced with. We can overcome all the difficulties that are afflicting our economies. And Ghana is in a position to provide leadership. But in spite of this, it is important we work as a region or as a sub-region. And I therefore want to call on ECOWAS and the African Union to lead by example and spearhead initiatives to promote cross-border infrastructure investments and connectivity. Traditional financing mechanisms may no longer suffice in meeting the growing demands of our rapidly expanding economies. We must therefore explore new avenues for mobilizing resources, including PPPs, public-private partnerships, green bonds, as well as leveraging digital technologies to enhance financial inclusion and access to capital. PPPs have proven to be effective mechanisms for leveraging private sector expertise. I therefore want to encourage African governments to embrace PPPs as viable solution to bridge infrastructure gap and drive economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, macroeconomic stability is another key requirement if we have to grow our economies. Unfortunately, global happiness sometimes adversely distort our efforts at creating that enabling environment. After having been hit by negative global developments recently, we have to reset our economies to become more resilient, as we have no control over those global happenings. Ghana, for example, was doing very well before these global happenings. We were growing at average 7%. Inflation was a single digit. Fiscal deficit was on target. But the good news is that we do not relent. Our president, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, refuses to relent. And therefore, we have been implementing pragmatic policies which are bringing the economy back stronger. ladies and gentlemen, the rebound in our economy is well appreciated by our people who have suffered the hardship inflicted on us by this global happiness. And we are confident that sooner than later, the sacrifices they have made will bear fruits for the benefit of all of our people. Today, as I speak to you, growth ended 2023 at 2.9%, above the target of 1.5%. Inflation halved in 12 months, from 54% by end of 2022 to 25% by April this year. And we are expected to move inflation further down to 15% by the end of this year, hoping to bring it back to a single digit by 2027. But this is at a huge cost to our people, because we have had to embark on huge fiscal adjustments that saw deficits going down. Primary deficit, for example, moved down from 4.3% by end 2022 to just 0.3% by end 2023. And this year, we are determined to move from the deficit range to a surplus of 0.5% by the end of this year. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is important that we take the necessary but difficult decisions to ensure that we create the macroeconomic environment that will incentivize investment and that will bring the growth we so much need for the benefit of our people. Before I conclude, I would like to express my gratitude to the Africa Prosperity Network, our esteemed partners, and all participants who continue to make this vision a resounding success. Your commitment to the prosperity of our continent is genuinely commendable. Let us carry with us the insights gained, the connections forged, and the shared responsibility to translate our discussions into actionable initiatives. Africa's journey to prosperity is a collective endeavor, and each of us plays a pivotal role in shaping this trajectory. The launch of the 3rd edition of the Africa Prosperity Dialogues serves as a timely platform to reaffirm our commitment to advancing prosperity and development across the continent. Let us seize this opportunity to embrace innovation, to foster partnerships, and chart a course towards a more prosperous and sustainable future for all Africans. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, Minister for Finance for the Republic of Ghana. A while ago, I mentioned a certain music that had been written by Gabi Asari Ochre Dako and originally performed by the musician Stoneboy. We're going to have an instrumental version of that piece by Six Strings as we get ready, as we get the stage ready for the next presentation and panel. Six Strings.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Africa. This song has a special message for everyone here. I hope you grab it. Thank you. Africa unite, 'cause we're moving right out of Babylon, and we're going to our father's land. how good and how pleasant it will be before God and man to see the unification of all Africans. As it's been said already, let it be done, yeah. 'Cause we are the children of the Rasta man. Said we are the children of the higher man. So Africa unite, Africa unite, yeah. Africa unite, 'cause we're moving right out of Babylon. Yes, we're going to our father's land. How good and how pleasant it will be before God and man to see the unification of all Africans. As it's been said already, let it be done. 'Cause we are the children of the Rasta man. Said we are the children of the higher man. So Africa unite, unite for the benefit of your children. Africa unite, Africa unite, yeah. Africa unite, 'cause we're moving right out of Babylon. Said we're going into prosperity. Yes, we're moving right out of Babylon. Said we're going to our mother's land. Thank you very much. The land is good, our land is fine. Gold we have, diamonds we mine. Yet we fight, we cover it all in blood. Wallow in the man. Africa, 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 yeah. We cry for peace, Africa. So the land is good, our land is fine. Gold we have, diamonds we mine. Yet we fight, we cover it all in blood. Tell me why we wallow in the mud. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Six Strings. I hope that was a refreshing break. We will now invite the Vice President of the Africa. I have a blank. AFDB. So we will invite Mr. Solomon Quaino. He's Africa Development Bank Vice President. He will be giving a statement on advancing infrastructure for intra-African trade and its relevance to delivering prosperity on the continent.
Your Excellency, Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the CFTA Secretariat, Mr. Gabi Asari Ochiri Daku, Executive Chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network, ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps here present, leaders of development finance institutions, private sector representatives, and distinguished guests. For me, when I hear Bob Marley, I get ready. Yes. The revolution, African unity. Maybe I'm demonstrating my age, but that's okay. So, thank you for the opportunity to address you on behalf of the African Development Bank on the subject of advancing infrastructure for intra-African trade and its relevance to delivering prosperity on the continent. As the post-COVID era comes into focus, and as we still grapple with the residual economic impacts of the pandemic and the Russian-Ukraine war, one of the key takeaways from these crises is the urgent need for the implementation of the CFTA and concomitantly the need for accelerated infrastructure development. Better connected economies, integrated markets, regional supply chains, and enhanced manufacturing capacities could have softened the adverse economic impact of the pandemic, particularly regarding supply chain disruptions, access to personal protective equipment and medicines, demand contraction in commodity markets, and the growing cost of consumer goods. Our challenges during these crises demonstrated to an absolute degree how infrastructure development could work as a counter-cyclical tool during periods of global economic downturn. With the advent of the CFTA, Africa's quest to integrate regional and global value chains may be achieved first through deeper and wider intra-regional trade. Evidence shows that value-added goods account for a significant share of non-traditional intra-African exports. However, to achieve such meaningful expansion of trade, we need an adequate supply of quality trade-supported infrastructure, and especially in the energy, transport, and telecommunications infrastructure space. The supply gap for trade infrastructure results in high trading costs for the continent. For example, African exports face transport costs of up to 7.7% of their delivered value, which is more than twice as high as the world average of 3.7%. The trade costs are even higher for landlocked countries, and Africa has the largest number of landlocked countries. There are 16 of them. In the energy sector, Africa's trade competitiveness is significantly impacted by unreliable and exorbitantly priced power supply. An often quoted statistic, to put it in perspective, is that all of sub-Saharan Africa generates less electricity than the country of Spain, whose population is only 47 million people. So to address this infrastructure gap, Africa needs, as several others have said before me, about $130 to $170 billion a year, with a financing gap of 70 to 110 billion. This financing gap is increased as we aim to ensure that all infrastructure today is climate change resilient or compliant. So closing this gap remains the single most important step we can take to structurally boost our economic development, make it more inclusive and competitive, and to attain the Africa we want. So the AFDB commitments to infrastructure totaled about $10 billion in the last 6 years, with most of the financing going to, once again, transport, energy, and ICT, which we've already mentioned are critical sectors for intra-African trade. In 2023 alone, we approved 12 projects across 15 countries valued at close to $3 billion, directly supporting the implementation of the CFTA by providing trade linkages for Africans. Regional corridors are a particular focus for us at AFDB, and we have concluded recent projects such as the Tanzania SGR rail network, which connects Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC, as well as 28 one-stop border posts to really facilitate the movement of goods and people across borders. And our pipeline includes the famous Lagos-Abidjan Economic Corridor, which would critically connect 80% of the GDP of West Africa. We're also working on the Lobito Corridor, which connects Angola, Zambia, and DRC by railway. And we're doing this with partners like the Africa Finance Corporation, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investments of the US, the European Union, and also the 3 countries involved. Our pipeline also includes private sector investments in one-stop border posts, where we're looking to invest in a company called Scanning Systems that looks to provide private and PPP projects in terms of one-stop border posts. Despite all these efforts, the infrastructure financing gap remains a critical imperative. To further contribute towards closing this gap, the AFDB has created the Africa Investment Forum, which offers a platform for transformational infrastructure projects to be showcased in order to unblock critical bottlenecks, especially with governments participating, and also to attract more investments from global and regional financial sources. The bank also hosts the NEPAD Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility because we need to prepare bankable projects. And as the minister mentioned earlier, with a limited fiscal space of a lot of countries, we need to really encourage private sector participation in the form of PPPs. So a lot of times, we always look for money from outside. But I like to say that we have money inside Africa. Yes, global financial assets are probably 159 trillion. But within Africa, we estimate that African sovereign wealth funds, African pension funds, African life insurance companies, in aggregate, manage assets under management of close to $2.5 trillion. What if we could find ways to channel just 10% of that into the infrastructure and industrial space? So we have started to create African institutions that can do that. InfraCredit is a monoline guarantee agency in Nigeria that has catalyzed about $400 million into the infrastructure space. We've replicated that in Kenya, but we've decided that to do that in Kenya, we'll do it on a regional basis. So we're creating the Damana Guarantee Company. We plan to do this also in Ghana, Minister and Gabi. We plan to do it in Francophone Africa, wherever we see the aggregation of long-term local currency savings. We as AFDB would seed some of these institutions, and we'll also provide guarantees for these institutions to actually deliver. So please, charity begins at home. Let's not always look outside. Let's see what we can do. And so let me conclude by saying, Gabi, we buy into your vision, and AFDB will continue to be a supporter of the African Prosperity Dialogues.
Vice President of the African Development Bank, AFDB, Mr. Solomon Quainer. He spoke on advancing infrastructure for intra-African trade and its relevance to delivering prosperity on the continent. We have come to a key moment in this morning's deliberations. We are now going to have a panel discussion, which is going to be led by Gayhart Mensah, who's board member at the Africa Prosperity Network. We have a wonderful lineup of wonderful people who are going to be sitting on the panel. First among them is Mr. Mo Damush, Group CEO of Telecel. A round of applause. Good morning. Telecel was our main sponsor for the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards last year, and I'm sure we're going to have them this year again. Thank you very much, Mo Damush. Second is Mr. Kofi Osafo-Maafo, Director General, SNIT, Ghana. And because we're talking about infrastructure, railways matter. And so we're going to have with us Honorable Mr. John Peter Amew, Minister for Railway Development, Ghana. You would have to excuse me for daring to change protocol by not calling you as the last speaker. This is because they say ladies first, but the most important thing I'm going to suggest to you is to have the lady last, because she is the representative of half of the people in this room. And so we're going to invite Mrs. Marafatu Abiola Bewa, CEO, Africa for UBA. Thank you very much. We shall now call upon the moderator, Mr. Gerhard Menzer.
Thank you very much, and good morning once again. We have a context, and the context is what is increasingly becoming or increasingly referred to as the paradox of Africa's infrastructure. What does that refer to? There is a huge craving for infrastructural projects that would enhance intra-African trade. There are adequate sources of funding for these projects. Investor appetite is high, and there appears to be an extensive list of potential projects. Yet, there is a huge deficit when it comes to infrastructure in Africa. And with that context, I turn to my panelists. I would want to start with the Director General of SNIT. Infrastructure is critical for trade and for development. What do you consider to be the key deficits in Africa's infrastructure?
Well, thank you very much, Gerhard. I think there are several. It's very difficult to just pinpoint it to one. There are several. And I think when we look across and just around us, they are very evident. You cannot power growth by any means with a deficit in energy production, or for that matter, energy production not well planned or coordinated. And that, for me, is the most central. If you look at electricity coverage just across Africa, it's something about 30%. In developing countries, and other developing countries, is probably 70% plus, getting close to the 90% mark. And so if you have that deficit, it's extremely difficult to grow. In fact, I believe you cannot even leverage on any value chain where you are depending on your natural resources. Take aluminium, for example. How do you develop the value chain if power is short? So for me, energy is key, and it's just not about building the plants, but also locating them. And again, just drawing on our experience at SNIT, through our subsidiary, we are facilitating positioning a plant in the Middle Belt. It says something about the structure of our power generation in the country. Because of transmission losses and no power plants up in the middle, we have a huge problem. And so those additions are key, but they must also be positioned well. You can look at, just to add also, the telecoms, let's call it the technology side of things. If you take the telecom side of things and you just take our recent experiences, something is amiss. The key for me is that it appears we are growing so rapidly, we are not building in any redundancy. And our regulatory systems around the continent have allowed our growth not to build in redundancy. So there's been great investment, there have been great returns coming out of the sector, but we have not built in redundancy. And that just came to light when we had recent problems with the undersea cables. So we need to really look at how we address issues of making sure that we have redundancy within our system to grow. Because if you don't, you're going to be constrained. Connectivity and providing alternatives to what we do is key. And we are all very hooked onto just one method in this whole telecom saga, which is our cables. We must look, or at least those countries that are not equipped must look beyond that and see how we can increase our connectivity, because in today's world is the internet access, it's digital. We talked about interoperability. You need to build connectivity and you need to build some redundancy.
Thank you.
I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Damush, Mr. Osafo-Marfo in his submission made reference to telecommunications. It's one of the infrastructure that's often referred to as a must-have when it comes to integration on the continent. What do you think it has for African integration, from your perspective as an operator?
Yeah, thank you. I think we need to review some numbers first. According to the World Bank study on the sub-Saharan Africa, there is a requirement to spend 7.1% of the GDP on infrastructure. Today, only half of that is being spent. There is a requirement to spend 93 billion every year on infrastructure. 30 billion of that should be spent on maintenance alone, and 60 billion on new infrastructure to meet the demand of the market. Today, we are only spending half of that. So the investment is a key issue. Yeah? When it comes to the digital and telecom infrastructure, where we witness the most on how it's evolving, as infrastructure operators and mobile operators, we've been serving our customers mainly in the last few years to provide them proper data and proper connectivity. Today, we are transitioning from providing data to our customers to providing data to the industries. So now it's becoming more than a customer data to be an industrial data. And this transition would require a lot of investment and focus on the infrastructure, because now all of the industries are going to be dependent on data in the coming decade. We're talking about absolutely all industries. And of course now with the AI being a key element today, evolving into the digital industry, the need for infrastructure is also increasing. Now, how we can achieve that? How can we cover this challenge, especially that with the gap that we have in investment? At least on Telecel side, we believe that partnerships are key to overcome those challenges. And there are two types of partnerships here. I've heard the speakers talking about public and private partnerships, but also the private and private partnerships is also very important. We've seen in many places where infrastructure is duplicated, where if there are partnerships between competitors. It would allow a faster growth of the infrastructure. On the telecom space, for example, the network sharing is very important, but also the liberalization of the industry is also very important to allow other players and other disruptors to contribute to that part. So there are plenty of actions that can be done. Of course, the regulatory environment is very important to achieve that. The partnerships between the private and private sector is very important to achieve that, but also in a competitive mode, it's not easy for two private companies to partner, but having a proper regulatory environment would definitely help in achieving that. And then we have the public and private partnership that the Vice President just talked about, which is also a key element, an important element in developing infrastructure. Why? Because, for example, in telecom, we are so much dependent on energy as a key element in developing our infrastructure and a key element in maintaining the function of that infrastructure. Today, our estimate, and the World Bank estimate, is we will need to double the, or at least the need for electricity in the next 10 years will double. What we are doing in order to accommodate that need is minimal. And this will create a lot of challenge for that infrastructure. So that's why it's important to synchronize between what the telecom industry is doing and the rest of the industries. Electricity, also the road infrastructure, because we're having a lot of fiber cuts because of the lack of coordination between the two industries. So having a proper environment and proper regulatory framework to synchronize all of these industries also would be very helpful.
Thank you very much. So Mr. Osafo made reference to the World Bank estimate, which says that we need to invest at least 7.1% of our GDP as a continent in infrastructure every year if we expect to catch up. And then there is the African Development Bank estimate, which also says that, I mean, it tries to put it in monetary terms, that we need about 170 billion of investment in infrastructure every year. Mrs. Biwa, is this funding accessible from where you sit?
I'll say yes. They said, there's a saying that says that a 1,000 miles journey starts with the first step, isn't it? And I think Solomon did mention that there is some capacity across Africa. And I was very glad because I always ask myself that why do we have so many commercial banks, so many finance, regional finance corporations? We have AFDB, we have Exim in virtually, I think almost all the countries have their offices. We have AFC. Some countries across Africa have 30 commercial banks, 34 commercial banks, 25 commercial banks. So it is becoming clearer that there's some capacity in Africa itself. So that is good news. So I want to believe, and leveraging on what he said, that we should begin to have more dialogues. And that's why I think that we should appreciate Mr. Gabi Ochridakun and the wife for this platform. It is not enough for just a yearly thing. There should be more dialogues between the various stakeholders. Now, having said that, coming from a bank that has about, we have close to 20 countries across Africa. We have financed infrastructure heavily in some countries, including Ghana. But what I would say is for us to have some kind of mindset, a change in mindset. that will enable commercial banks like ourselves to want to partner government. I know most of us are interested in 24-hour lights. We are interested in phosphate roads. We don't want any potholes. We are looking for, what's the name, telecoms, telecommunication that are, faultless. We are looking for perfect infrastructure, but we must be ready to pay for them. So as a commercial bank, I think that I want to participate in where I can see the money. So yesterday, one of my countries in Southern Africa, had a conversation with me and said, a country wants 200 million. The first question I ask is, how will it be paid for? So I will as much want to encourage the stakeholders that PPP, which is the public-private partnership, is actually the main key across Africa. When I travel around and I see the level of deficit, the light-offs that we experience in Ghana, seriously, I tell people Ghana is still America when you compare it to other African countries. The infrastructure gap is quite huge, and the amount that will be required for us to get it to the level that is required is actually also quite huge. So for us to expect that government alone will do it, I think is not feasible. So the private partnership, and that's where we, the commercial banks, can come in. And we will only come in when we see receivable. There was a 300 million facility we gave in one of my countries. The road is so good, the toll is $2, and people have not gone on Aluta yet. They are paying, and you will be happy to pay for it because of the condition of the road. So I will say that, yes, the amount is huge, but Mr. Solomon has given us some good news that it actually exists in Africa. At least let's start. But the commercial bank mindset, we will want that money to be collected back. So in as much as we have identified the gaps, we, the citizens, we, the Africans, must also be part of it and be ready to pay something back, at least for maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you, too. I'm sorry, but Mr. Osafo-Maafo has become the reference point. Again, he spoke about energy infrastructure. He spoke about telecommunications. He spoke about road infrastructure. And that is where I bring in Honorable Peter Amewu. Not so much about road, but about railways. Okay. The literature also says that Africa needs about $130 billion investment in the railway sector in order to facilitate trade in the continent. Is this a task that is achievable from where you sit? I know Ghana, until about 10 years ago, lost most of its railways and was operating on just about 13%. That has improved in recent times. What is happening pan-continent in terms of efforts to meet this target?
Thank you. It is a fact that infrastructure development is a key index to aggressive growth, employment opportunities with its multiplier effect on economies. Africa totally has a land space of about 30 million kilometers squared. Out of that 30 million kilometers squared, we have an average about 90,000 kilometers of railway line, which I think mathematically translates to 3 kilometers for every 1,000 kilometers squared of land surface. If you compare that with the European countries, for say, excuse me, European countries, we're talking about in excess of 100 kilometers for every 1,000 kilometers squared. So this tells you where we are and where we're coming from. And in Ghana, for instance, it translates to about 3.4 kilometers per 1,000 kilometers squared. You cannot, as a country, drive growth, improve on employment opportunities, give sustainable jobs to your people with this sort of data. It never works. It cannot work in any environment. So yes, is it doable? It is doable, but it's quite a difficult task. Why is it difficult? Railway, unlike road, it's quite a capital intensive. It costs about a minimum of about $7 million to develop double infrastructure, single lane, narrow gauge road in Africa, most African countries. If you compare that to road, it's about $900 to $1 million per every kilometer. The advantage for the railway is the durability. And so while the railway can last for, say, about 50 years, most of the roads we build in Africa, especially in Ghana, after every 6 months, you will need to go back and then undo what has been done. So it is a responsibility of African countries now to see how we address this gap and how we improve on the railway infrastructure. In Ghana, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo made it one of his priorities. The railways we have, the lines we have in Ghana under the colonial era was in excess of about 1,300 kilometers. That is the railway, but the route is about 944 kilometers. But what has happened over the period, because of the lack of maintenance and the fact that most of these lines are not lines that can pay for themselves, it's been run down. Railway infrastructure, again, should be seen as a social service. Just as we construct road, government must be able to come and construct railway lines and leave it to the private sector to operate. Most often, the agenda for most of the African countries, and I have listened to a number of groups here saying that the PPP is the way to go in addressing this infrastructure. Yes, it may, but not in railway. Because as an investor, my priority is to look at shortest payback period, huge return on my investment. The difficulty we have in Africa is anytime the PPP jumps in to undertake a railway project, the viability gaps become so huge, and governments upon governments are not ready to close that viability gaps. I'm yet to see in any African country where a private sector has gone deeply into this railway and is making a return on it. What we can do is government to prioritize the railway. Multilateral agencies, our donors, partners, bilateral agencies have been supporting. But it is a fact that the traditional mechanism of financing is not sustainable. If that is not sustainable, then we should begin to look at other alternatives, just as my colleague, the Minister for Finance, has addressed. How do we bring those alternatives together? And I think that is why my big sister is here, to get all the financing people, to put our head together as an African countries to see how we resolve it. So yes, it's easy to close the gap, but it's very difficult. PPP may be an alternative, but it cannot be a solution. PPP cannot be a solution. Especially my very good friend, the finance minister here. The difficulty and the bureaucracy in the Ministry of Finance to address one PPP problem in Ghana, it's about 5 years. I have embarked on a PPP project. I mean, nothing comes of it. So if the Minister of Finance, my very good friend, is telling me this is the way, then please, it's important that we begin to listen the bureaucracy, the difficulties that you have to undertake to go through. I have not, under His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo's term yet, see any PPP project in terms of roads or railway that have materialized. 8 years.
All right.
I haven't.
Thank you.
I haven't. So let us not just sit here and say it is the way. I think that it might be the way, but it cannot be a solution. Viability gaps must become a responsibility of government if we really want to address the railway infrastructure in our country.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I guess central to your concern is the issue of finance. And this is where I would ask Mr. Osafo-Maafo to take off his social protection hat and pick the finance one. What are the solutions?
I'm not convinced that PPP is entirely dead. I think that maybe it's the way we try to execute it that really lengthens it. And that is the real problem that we need to address, is how are we executing these projects. I also think that for the viability of any project, we have to try and combine the social aspect of it to the commercial. And that is most likely to ensure that there are commercial returns which ensure the social side can work. So that is how we really need to look at the financing of these projects. If you are looking at the mining sectors elsewhere and you are looking at rail, then the same rail could also serve the social and transport side. And maybe there should be some very strong coordination in trying to look at a financing structure which makes sure that those with the capital underpin it and the social side piggybacks on that. I also think that our whole regulatory structure, where we look at long-term capital, is to some extent also at fault. So we have pension funds into which people are saving daily, and regulation limits the ability to play in certain spaces, or they are encouraged to play at the short end. So we should really also look at how we can use the whole regulatory framework to encourage longer term capital. I think one of the interesting points which was being raised was about banking and the way they could partner it. I think that is most definitely the case. But again, commercial banking, certainly in Ghana, in most part, looks at the short end. So there definitely has to be some partnership to ensure that you lengthen the process. And I think finally we need to look at our own capacity to fund these projects. We need to almost look at some external sources on, for example, green bonds, the climate funds, which can lower our cost of capital. Ultimately, it's about the cost of capital that you want to lower. The cost of capital, if it's not lowered, we would never develop. And we should really look at alternatives that bring down the cost of capital across sectors. If we don't do that by providing some capacity, some know-how, some linking of public and private sectors, and some planning for the sectors that have the capital to actually inject it into the system, we do have a problem. So for me, I think the financing is perfectly possible. We just need to look at how we combine it to lower the cost of capital.
Thank you. I should have announced that we're streaming live on social media, YouTube, Facebook, and some other traditional media platforms. I come to you. But look, before then, let me go to Mrs. Bewia, because we're still talking about this issue of finance, public-private partnership, and financial solutions. What do you think about the intervention by the Honorable Minister and the contribution by Mr. Osafo-Maafo?
Well, government is still in the center of this whole thing. And Mr. Osafo-Maafo will agree with me that the cost of funding is a function of what everybody does in the economy. So how much you put in my bank, how much you demand for as interest, how much the government gives me, my ability to access cheap funds, So it's a function of the economy, really. So if T-bill is ranging at 10%, and I'm not able to do business with big institutions like SNATE to be able to get cheap funds, the cost of funds is what, there's a formula that the central bank has put out. So it will come out at 15%. So I think that government is still in the center. I think we just raised the CRR of banks. Once you raise that, bank will pass it on to the lenders. So once that also goes up, the cost of funds will go up. So it's a function of what we do. So it's good that Mr. Safo-Mavo has mentioned this, but I think that it is a platform like this that will need to identify, okay, we've identified that banking is key. Maybe African Prosperity Network will also organize something with the central bank. How do we bring the cost of funds down? The banks will give their own side of the story, and the central bank and the rest of the key holders will also. But I think that we must bring the cost of funds down. It's a must. And I do agree with him, but I'm saying that it is not a one-sided, it's two sides of the coin that we need to look at. Everybody will have to come together to bring that cost of funds down, because without it, it's not going to happen. Number two, he spoke about short time in financing projects. I do agree. And I think that in some countries, I'm able to do 8 years. I'm able to do 10 years. In one of my countries, I think we just did 12 years. And that is also a function of the economy. I do have people who keeps money with me for 10 years. In Ghana, I think the longest we have on our books is a year. So it's also for us to steer the economy in a direction where people feel comfortable to invest. I also think that in order to address this issue, we need to look at the stock exchange. I think that our stock exchange is underperforming. I think we need to get it more interesting. The huge institutions will have to go there. I was very happy, I think 3 days ago, on one of our platforms, I saw that we are developing the commercial paper. Yes, things like this will have to come on so that the banks will not see themselves as a monopoly, and then they will be forced to want to lend on longer term. But nobody is going to develop Africa for us. And I kept telling I was looking at the sponsors, and I was asking myself, why am I not here? Why are banks not here? So we will have to go beyond just commercial banking and be interested in the economy so that we can support very beautiful adventures like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Damush, if government should come to you, African government should come to you as a telecommunications operator or to the telecom sector and ask, what is it that you can offer in order to speed up African trade and African integration? What would be that one thing from the telecom sector?
I think this is the importance of having APN's initiative and Mr. Gabi's vision in bringing government and private sectors together in order to have this discussion. But definitely, to answer your question, there are a lot of things that the government can do. In telecoms, the industry is so agile that it can change and adapt to regulations so quickly. I'll give a very small example. I like to give this example all the time. I have a friend of mine who's a dentist in the US. He's building telecom towers and leasing them to telecom operators. The regulations in the US would allow anyone to build a telecom tower and lease it to a mobile operator. The liberalization in the industry is allowing such initiatives to happen. The mobile operators are not asking people to build telecom towers. They're not doing that. The regulations, when you have the right regulations in place, people will take the initiative. We are very hopeful that platforms like APN would allow such ideas to evolve. Today, what do we need from governments? We need a dynamic regulations. the tech industry is developing very fast, while the regulations are not on the same momentum. That's a big challenge. So we need more momentum. The second thing is the processes. Technology is fast. Bureaucracy and processes are slower than technology. So every time you have an initiative, you need a long time until you're able to have the agreements with the government, especially when there is a partnership with the government that is required. And number three is the licensing procedure, which should be open for technology players. Today, in most countries, I mean, Telecel operates in 6 countries today, and in all these 6 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we deal with the same technology players. While in the markets, there are plenty of technology players. Some of them are local players that they have developed their own solutions. But with the lack of financing for those players, they're not able to sell. Because when a tech player comes to me with a vendor financing, I would rather to work with the one with the full package. So encouraging those initiatives as well, and empowering other tech players in the sub-Saharan Africa is also an important and key element.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Mewu, you have the last word. When will I pick a train from Accra to Lagos?
I'm happy you asked this question while the Minister for Finance sits right here. Under His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, Ghana has done a lot within the industry. We have developed, for instance, what we call the feasibility studies completed for the Trans-ECOWAS line, which runs from Lomé straight to Ivory Coast. One of the novel projects that would have been a surprise to the continent is a project His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo commenced together with his counterpart in Burkina Faso, which is a joint development train. That might be one of the best in Africa. And that runs from Tema through Mpakana, through Volta region, Tamale, Paga, all the way to Burkina Faso. We have done about 100 kilometers of that line. Unfortunately, when there was a change in the military government, when they took over, discussions stalled. One of the difficulties, again, for that project has to do, as I stated earlier on, with the PPP, because it's supposed to be run under the PPP. The viability gap identified within that project alone was in excess of about $1.2 billion dollars. The difficulty is, how does government close that viability gap? And because the private sector, it's saying, well, I'm not going to invest this money if government is not prepared to close the viability gap. It never, materialized. And so train from Ghana to Nigeria is possible. We started train from Ghana to Burkina. So why not Nigeria if Dr. Amin it's here and ready to do the wonders? We can see the improvement in the economy. And as and when we expand and there's a lot of voting power there, I don't think it's going to forget, the Ministry for Railway Development. So that can be done, and it's doable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What seems to stand out very clearly is that making progress with Africa's infrastructure requirement, plugging the gaps, the deficits, is a joined-up effort between governments, the private sector, and also the investor community. I would want to, at this point, quote a statement that was made by the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina, who said, Africa has to build back better and bolder I like the alliteration there. Africa has to build back better and bolder with focus on economic, climate, and health resilience. At the end of the day, it's about infrastructure for Africa's integration and African trade. So is it about infrastructure that would promote prosperity for all the people of Africa. On this note, I thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. Enjoy the rest of the day.
And thank you very much for your wonderful discussions. This is only a prelude to what we're going to have at the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025. We will have a lineup of incredible speakers from all across Africa. And between Honorable Amewu and Honorable Amin, I wouldn't like to be at the cabinet meeting to see the punch-up. All right, so, so thank you very much. Mr. Mo Dumesh, Group CEO of Telecel, Mr. Kofi Osafo-Maafo, Director General, SNET Ghana, Honorable Mr. John Peter Amewu, Minister for Railway Development Ghana, and Mrs. Marafatu Abiola Baua, CEO Africa for UBA. We are getting to a crux and perhaps the final stages of this meeting, and that will be the launch. So we will have a message from our sponsors, and then we will have our launch video, and then we will invite on stage Mr. Solomon Quainer and Honorable Amin, and of course, our very own Mr. Ochridako to launch Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025. Shall we have the message from our sponsors right now? Thank you.
Welcome to Dev Tackle Group. We are excited to introduce you to our dynamic organization where opportunities for growth and development abound.
We prioritize our people. We recognize that our team members are our greatest assets, and we invest heavily in their growth and their development.
Our open door policy and collaborative culture ensure that everyone's voice is heard, fostering innovation and teamwork.
Our projects stand as testament to excellence in construction and design.
Dev Chaco is not just a corporation, it's a family that values ideas, nurtures growth, and encourages you to make a difference. We bring together diverse talents and perspectives that fuel our innovation and problem-solving abilities.
Joining the Traco means joining a global family, like family where we all share that passion for excellence and obviously for like a brighter future.
Thank you very much, Dev Traco. We shall now have our launch video.
This is Africa, endowed with vast natural resources. This is Africa, home to the world's fastest growing population. This is Africa, a potential green energy force to be reckoned with, from Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, capable of powering the entire East Africa. West Africa's gas reserves, capable of powering vast regions, to the Democratic Republic of Congo's Grand Inga Dam project, capable of powering the entire continent. This is Africa, where the discovery of large oil and gas deposits are still being made. But this is also Africa, where we export significant crude oil and import even more significant petroleum products. This is Africa, where one of the largest well-managed airlines in the world continues its growth trajectory unhindered. But this is also Africa, where a business person from Algeria has to connect outside the continent to travel to Zimbabwe. According to the World Bank, the sub-Saharan African region needs to invest a staggering 7.1% of its GDP annually in infrastructure to meet its sustainable development goals. The African Development Bank estimates that closing the continent's infrastructure gap will require a minimum of $130 billion per year, leaving a shortfall of around $100 billion. While bridging this financing chasm presents a Herculean task, change is already simmering beneath the surface as several initiatives gain ground. Because this is Africa, where infrastructure investments in transport and logistics, industry, science and technology present an immense potential for both private and institutional investors. Africa's path to prosperity rests on two pillars: substantial investments in transportation infrastructure and the ratification of ambitious trade agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. This is Africa, where our shared prosperity lies in integration. Africa faces significant trade hurdles as barriers, tariffs, and restrictions on the movement of people and goods continue to slow policy efforts made by the African Union and regional economic communities to forge a unified continent capable of thriving in the global marketplace. The AfCFTA, with its potential to create the world's largest single market of over 1.4 billion people and a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, is a game changer, complementing trade integration by reducing transportation time on roads, ports, and border posts, promises to boost exports by 11.5% and GDP by 2%. To fully harness these benefits, Africa must develop an integrated continent-wide infrastructure network. This will require increasing annual infrastructure investments from 3.5% to 4.5% of GDP, or an additional $40 billion a year. Public-private partnerships and the mobilization of domestic resources and local capital markets are pivotal for the continent's development. And because this is Africa, connectivity matters, with the continent's digital economy undergoing a seismic shift. Projections by the African Development Bank show that the digital sector will surge from $115 billion in 2023 to $712 billion by 2050. Africa's rapid adoption of mobile financial services is fueling financial inclusion and growth, highlighting the transformative potential of digital infrastructure. Africa's astounding leapfrog in mobile telephony and now mobile financial services is evidence of the continent's endless opportunities for investments that connect us. This is Africa, where challenges present immense opportunities. By investing strategically, integrating effectively, and prioritizing connectivity, Africa can unlock a new era of shared prosperity for its burgeoning population. The Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025 provide a roadmap for this transformation, a call to action for governments, the private sector, and international partners to unite behind a common vision. We welcome you to the next Africa Prosperity Dialogues, which takes place in Accra from the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025. Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025, delivering Africa's prosperity through infrastructure. Invest, integrate, connect.
A resounding round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Delivering Africa's prosperity through infrastructure, invest, integrate, and connect. At this juncture, we will invite Mr. Ochridako, Honorable Amin, and Mr. Queno on the stage, and they will be joined by all the speakers for today. Please join them on the stage for the launch of Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025.
But we don't have to do anything special, do we? It's just a matter of, it's been launched.
It's been launched.
Okay. Okay.
And then a group photo.
Okay. I got some good news here, actually. I heard the CEO for UBA Africa wondering why they are not a sponsor. So you are a sponsor from now on, madam. Thank you so much. I think we know the theme. The theme is what? Delivering prosperity through infrastructure. Invest, which is the most important thing. Integrate. And connect. If I may add, we will be hosting, it will be a 3-day event. The 3-day event will take place here in Accra at the conference center. And to get the dates right, I believe from the 30th, which would be a Thursday, to the 1st of February, which is a Saturday.
Right after World Economic Forum.
He says right after the World Economic Forum. I'm not too sure what that is, but and on the final day, we will have the Africa Prosperity Champions Awards and the presidential.
The most coveted.
The most coveted, he calls it. Yes, yes. Propaganda any day. And that will take place at the, I believe it's called, is it a dome? Yes, which is the Grand Arena, which is also within the vicinity of the conference center. We've decided to have it here in Accra for just for next year. And then we'll have, because what we did was the last time we had too many people for the Champions Awards, and a lot of people couldn't get in. So we decided to do it at the Dome. So we have the dates, we have the venues, and then we have the theme. And I've never seen a launch where you get a precursor of what to come with a panel conversation. So we are most grateful to our distinguished panelists. And it's a really high-powered panel we had. The Director General of the country's biggest pension fund. I've seen Lady Jandel there, how are you? And then we have, of course, Mr. Mo Damush, who is the Group CEO of Telecel. And Telecel, as we all know, have taken over Vodafone. Thank you. And then we have the minister who has brought railway back into Ghana, except we are yet to see the train. I heard he had a little problem. Is it fixed? Is the train fixed? It's fixed. Okay. Okay. So we had him, and he took the opportunity to put pressure on the finance minister. And I wonder why he didn't expand it to the vice president of the AFDB, because I think that's where also the pressure should go, because the DFIs are building the capacity to do more for our continent. Infrastructure is key, but I think for SMEs in Africa, they are looking for how they can sell their trade across borders. And I think we are getting there. So I will invite the Vice President of AFDB to be joined by the Finance Minister to declare APD 2025 duly launched.
So this is a very easy job. So I declare APD 2025 duly launched.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. You may take your seats. Two final things. We're going to have an announcement of our roadmap by General Manager of APN, Stephanie Jetta. And then after that, we're going to have some entertainment by our very own Stone Boy, accompanied on guitar by Six Strings. He didn't know. There, he's going to do it. Right, Stone? Right, okay then, Stephanie.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis ravie d'être devant vous, d'autant plus que vous êtes levés très tôt ce matin pour être parmi nous. So, all protocol observed. As the MC said, we have been very busy this year already. We have done a lot of advocacy work after APD 2024 in January. So our calendar activities for the year as follows. At the end of May, we will organize a panel discussion on interoperability at the Africa Soft Power Conference in Kigali. In June, we will be joining Afrexim Bank in the Bahamas for the annual summit. In July, we will organize an industry-specific symposium on interoperability by bringing together industry experts. So we hope to drive actionable policies in the area of interoperability across Africa. Again, in July, we will be presenting a second policy proposal at the African Union Mid-Year Summit. In September, we will hold the Global Africa Forum with our partners, the Africa-America Institute, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. From September to December, we will have a press conference across Africa and our famous cocktail partners. So please visit our website at africaprosperitynetwork.com for more information about our activities. Once again, we thank you very much for coming and thank you for your commitment to the Africa Prosperity. Together, let us continue to invest, integrate, connect. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, merci d'être venus parmi nous ce matin. Au nom des PN, merci.
Thanks, Stephanie Jetta. Stoneboy, something to move us, and then we will join the 3I Summit right after your
good morning,
presentation.
Distinguished. My bad, I don't know the terms, but I know everybody here is important, very important. Listening to everything that went on, I was just feeling like I was telling Joseph that I wish the creative arts could lend money to the railway sector, you know, so that we can buy like 10 new trains and just make sure that we have our music playing back to back. Just find a way to make something off it, but unfortunately, we're not even paid royalties. I don't want to fight Gramo. Yes, but let's do this for the people. And this song was written by Mr. Gavio Tridako, and I had the opportunity to turn it into melodies. So let's make it happen. It's called I Believe in Africa. Do you believe in Africa though? Anyway, do you? If you don't, let me go home, please. Do you believe in Africa? Do you believe in Africa? Thank you very much. Let's go.
Ready?
Take it and I'll come inside.
A big fraud is just system. We're tired of being the system.
Of the faraway walls, burning walls.
Pull it.
All right, let me take it over. It goes so then. A big fraud is the system. We are tired of being the victims of their faraway walls. Tear down the Berlin walls. Don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south. Take the train from the east to the west. Fly direct from Accra to Kingston. 5G internet no matter where me day.
Well, I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa, yeah. Said I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa.
All Africa, Ghana, all Africa, Nigeria, Congo, are you in the house? All right then, no dollarization to unification. We are the biggest single market. Say no more to the colonial ratchet. They don't care, they never will be fair. Let's come together and grab our share. Join the fast track to prosperity. We want food and energy security till eternity. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Said I believe in Africa. Africa. Do you believe? I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa. All Africa. Loke Senegal. Loke. Côte d'Ivoire. Loke. Angola. Loke. I say Rwanda. Loke. Morocco. Loke. Barbados. Loke. Zimbabwe now. What me tell them? Say this is Africa's time, Mama Africa. So let the clock shine. It's not about you, in spite of you. Africa will unite. So let these words sink in your head. Divide and rule is dead. All Africa, look Ethiopia, Mali, Cameroon, Kenya in the building, Tunisia, Haiti, Zimbabwe now, all Africa. Can I say loke? That's it, loke. All Africa, loke. Ah, loke. All Africa, yeah. So we tell them now, said I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa, do you believe? I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa.